Terrell Edmunds, safety. His market value right now is, according to Spotrac, or what do you call it? Spot Rack.
Right? I don't know.
2 years, $10.9 million, $5.4 million a season. Ranks him the 27th highest paid safety in the NFL. I think that suits him pretty well. He's coming off of a $2.5 million deal this past season, so he gets a $3 million pay bump every year. Do you let him hit the market? Do you let him test the market and see what the waters are? Do you possibly negotiate him and Kazee at the same time and see what one you could get at a bigger discount? How do you handle that situation?
I'd be more willing to let Edmunds hit the market. $5 million seems not that much higher than what you'd want to pay for him. But still a little bit higher than you'd want to pay for, a little bit more than you want to pay for him. I think the fact that you have Kazee as a safety valve in this situation makes me more comfortable with letting Edmunds see what he has, see what other teams come back with, because I'm not totally convinced that other teams would pay $5 million for Terrell Edmunds.
No, I'm not either. No. I look at Edmunds and say he's a safety. The safety market's always terrible. People always underpay safeties. The longer you let him sit there, I don't think he's going to get more than $5 million. So maybe his value decrease. I think last year he was expecting to make $5 million plus, and that didn't happen. I think that could happen again this year.
Yeah. And like I said, Kazee is not a bad option. That's not the worst thing in the world if you've got if that's your replacement, if that's your backup plan. I don't think you need to negotiate him and Kazee at the same time. I think you hold on to Kazee and let him kind of do his thing while you kind of focus on Edmunds before you pull the trigger there.
Oh, so you're saying you prioritize Edmunds first, which I agree with, and then you try to get Kazee afterwards.
Right. You make a plan for Kazee after you know what you have or don't have with Edmunds.
Okay, I like that. I do like that, because at that point it gives you your options a safety valve. And I think I don't want to be this guy, but I might be this guy now. Derek dropped a mock draft today, actually, and his first round pick is for the Steelers is Brian Branch out of Alabama, who's a stud. Brian Branch is a stud. If he wasn't a safety, he'd be a top 10 pick with ease, but nobody wants to take a safety in the top 10 because, they're just Derwin James isn't worth it, or Minka Fitzpatrick isn't worth it in the eyes of the NFL. I mean, look at if Kazee doesn't want to sign and the Steelers want to go get a star-studded safety in the 17th pick in the draft, I'm all for it. I am all for it. Do I think that's an option right now? Maybe. I think it could be a surprise option if he's there on the board, just like TJ Watt was. People were talking a million other directions than TJ Watt, and then TJ Watt was there at whatever pick it was. I think it was 17. No, it might have been lower. TJ might have been the 27th pick in the first round. And the Steelers just couldn't pass him up because he's TJ Watt and he was the best player on the board. Brian Branch is there, maybe. But I agree. I think that when you look at Kazee, you let him see what his market value is. You don't want to overpay that guy, especially if he's going to be a backup. And at the same time, if Edmunds decides that he wants to go get paid somewhere, and maybe he does go get paid somewhere, maybe you start negotiating with Kazee. That's a good question, though, is if Edmunds says, no, I'm not taking this $3 million or $4 million a season, I'm going to go test the market. Do you begin negotiating with Kazee, or do you wait it out for Edmunds and see what happens?
It's a good question. I don't think you can wait very long.
Yeah.
You can kind of see, you'll be able to see the writing on the wall a little bit and see, okay, Terrell's talking to 8 different teams. There are a million guys, there are a million teams who want him. So we've got to ramp up what we're doing with Kazee versus there's not a lot of interest. I think they will also know somewhat ahead of time. They will have a decent read ahead of time on what the market for him is going to be like, at least in terms of interest, if not exact numbers. So I think they'll be able to make a call on whether Edmunds or Kazee need to kind of be, whether they need to move on to Kazee or whether they can wait it out with Edmunds.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody in the NFL is necessarily going to be jumping ship to say, hey, we got to go sign a safety right now, especially a guy like Terrell Edmunds. Nobody's going to be sitting there like, we'll talk. He's the first guy on our priority list in this offseason. I agree. I think safety is a much more difficult situation for the Steelers than people want to admit, or than we've talked about, I guess. But at the same time, I think it's the easiest situation because I think you could replace a safety with ease. And I just think that, there's always going to be somebody sitting there. At the end of free agency, there will always be a starting quality safety still on the market because that's what it is every single season. So if the Steelers don't get their guy and they don't get their backup plan in Kazee, somebody will be there, and you can just go get somebody and add him, and Minkah Fitzpatrick will turn him into a good player, and you could just, use the NFL draft, or I don't know, do something. You could find go draft Trenton Simpson at the 32 pick and say, hey, you're actually going to play safety for us. You're a terrible inside linebacker, but you're going to play safety.